in the global context. February the 1st, the end of this week, is the deadline for submissions to the World Heritage Committee. And our Prime Minister is going to go to the World Heritage Committee to ask that Tasmania's magnificent wilderness forests, the forests of the Styx and the Weald, the Florentine, be taken out of World Heritage. And the only reason he wants to do that is so that he can make them available once again for logging. This has outraged people around Australia and around the world. Only last year, Australia argued to the World Heritage Committee that the forests of the Tasmanian wilderness were of outstanding universal value to humankind and should be listed as World Heritage. That argument was accepted. 12 months later, Tony Abbott wants to go back and say they're only fit for logging. Well, people around Australia have started to campaign very strongly against the Abbott government's attempt to undermine our World Heritage status and destroy the forests, and one of those is Abby G. She has mounted a major campaign to collect signatures to say to the Abbott government, do not destroy our wilderness forests. Abby.
I started this petition basically because I was deeply concerned about the potential for these forests to be destroyed and the hopelessness of what it means to have things that aren't protected. Essentially, when conservationists and the Forestry Association are on the same side, it indicates that something is wrong. 68,000 signatories have signed this petition, and I think it highlights that this is of grave concern to many Australians. It's with that I have basically become a campaigner overnight. I trust that the government will see reason and stop what they're proposing.
Sorry, have a hand. Thank you. Thank you very much. This is the petition with 68,000 signatures from people around Australia saying, do not take Tasmania's forests out of the Tasmanian Wilderness World Heritage Area. And that goes on top of a decision that the World Heritage Committee will have to make in relation to the Great Barrier Reef. And again, Tony Abbott risks the Great Barrier Reef being listed as World Heritage in danger because he has approved the Abbott Point expansion, 3 million cubic metres of sludge to be dumped into the World Heritage Area. Is it any wonder that the rest of the world is saying what on earth is going on in Australia? It is absolutely unheard of for countries to go to the World Heritage Committee and ask to have their properties taken out of World Heritage so that they can destroy them. It is unbelievable that Tony Abbott would do that, but when you see how he's been bumbling around the world, whether it's on the Climate Convention, whether it's on East Timor, whether it's in relation to Indonesia or Sri Lanka, you can see that he doesn't care about the fact that he is demeaning Australia in the global context. In another issue of the day, I'm calling on Tony Abbott to make representations immediately in relation to Australian journalist Peter Greste, who is being held in Egypt for no other reason than he's doing his job as a journalist. Right around the world, media organisations and politicians such as John Kerry have been out saying to the Egyptians, please release the journalists. Peter Greste and his 4 colleagues are being held. They've had their detention extended. There is no clarity about the charges on which they are being held. But if it's good enough for John Kerry to speak out, it's good enough for Tony Abbott to speak out. And we really need to make sure that the Egyptians hear the message loud and clear, and that is that you have to have a free flow of information, that journalistic freedom is part of what being a democratic society is about. And if you are going to aim for global respect as a nation, you have to respect the rights of journalists. Tony Abbott let down Australians in the case of Colin Russell, and we don't want to see the journalist, Peter Greste, let down in the same way. So come on, Tony Abbott, stand up for an Australian journalist held overseas. We need to uphold freedom of the press. And on that subject, freedom of the press extends to the ABC. What on earth is Tony Abbott thinking, suggesting that the national broadcaster not do its job but instead pick and choose what it reports and how it reports it on the basis of whether it supports the Prime Minister's view of some jingoistic nationalism? The ABC is independent, it is loved by Australians, it produces excellent stories and news bulletins, and it must be allowed to freely, fairly and fearlessly report the news. What Tony Abbott is suggesting is that any news outlet, particularly the ABC, which is critical of any government policy, will come in from criticism from him. On one day, we've got Erica Betts keen to compliment the ABC because a story suits his agenda, and the same day you have the Prime Minister saying that it's un-Australian for the ABC to be reporting fearlessly and fairly criticisms that are being mounted against the government and asking for answers. Cabinet is meeting today with regard to Ardmona. Again, Tony Abbott goes to Davos and talks up free trade, says government should get out of the way, just let business go for it. Well, free trade has led to the massive dumping in Australia of cheap imports, which have undermined food processing. Not only do we had a high Australian dollar, but we've had the dumping of cheap imports, and that's put huge pressure on companies like SPC Ardmona. I'm calling on the government to support Ardmona. I think all Australians would want to see the last of our canneries kept open in this country and greater effort go into stopping the dumping of cheap imports into this country. We need to maintain all of our food growing areas and maximise our production, not only for ourselves but in terms of global food security. We do not want to see free trade touted at the expense of fair trade. Fair trade is what Australia needs. And Tony Abbott should explain why it is during the election campaign that he came down to Tasmania and said 16 million to Cadbury's, no real reason for that, just here's 16 million because we're trying to win an election. And now we've got Ardmona and the parent company being prepared to put in 150 million. Well, then I think the government needs to step up and support this company and the growers and the community that support it. We need to keep food processing in Australia.